Welcome to the show, it's time to unwind. With Dave B and Dave D, the best brews you'll find. Craft beer talk, it's a passion we share. From hops to malts, we're taking you there. This is Daftaboutcraft, where the good times flow. Sit back and relax, let the flavors glow. Brews, news, and views, we've got it all right. Cheers to craft beer, let's raise it tonight.
Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Welcome along to episode 77 of Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. We're here again. It's me, Dave D.
And me, Dave B.
What we got coming up on this one then, Dave?
We have a lot of ton chat, which will become clear as we go along. But our main interview is with Richard from Ton Brewing Co. It's a bit different because Richard very openly accepts that he does not brew these beers. He comes up with the recipe and then that is contracted out. But the recipes are his own and they're very faithfully reproduced. It's a different chat because Richard gets how to market a beer. But the most important thing is the beers actually taste really good, don't they?
The beers are great. It's really fascinating, actually, because he doesn't have a background in beer. He's a psychiatrist. So he sees alcohol in a very different way. So all this comes into the conversation. And he's very open about where they brew the beer and how they brew it. And he's on hand to watch and oversee it all. It's really interesting. So that's Ton Brewing. Got a bit of a Festbiers special going on as well. A couple of Festbiers into the arena.
Dave and I went and road tested what the originals have to offer, the OGs from Germany versus craft brewing equivalents.
And we've been talking, we thought it's time for a Pints of View. We haven't had one for a while, and there's a big question we want to tackle, and that is whether it's actually worth going out these days for a night out on the beers. Is it worth it, actually cost-wise? Do we want to do it, or do we want to stay at home in front of the fire, nice and warm, having a beer, or even a bottle of wine? It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, controversially, like wine getting involved, and as will become apparent, it is a very real conversation, it feels like now, and as someone who has had a financial change of events and is now watching the money and the sort of surplus for things like craft beer has gone down, do I want to be spending so much money with the added price on top of a pint versus, as you say, sitting at home with your loved ones and saving a bit of cost?
Yeah, we're going to be weighing that up in a sort of a debate on Pints of View. Four Cigar Tried and Tested, our favourite beer since last episode, and we'll kick off in the usual fashion with Brew to Me.
This time I am down in Alton in Hampshire for 10 Ton Brew Co, who also have their own tap house. So what I liked about them when I was perusing the internet was just the sheer variety of things they do. Just as a sort of quick guide, they've got a list on their website of all the beers they've ever brewed. I'm not going to go through them all, but you've got a strawberry sour, which I do have in the fridge, best bitter. There's a blackened West Coast IPA, double IPA, a dry hop lager, plenty of New Englands and pales and whatnot for, to keep the lights on, as probably say nowadays. The beer I've got is actually a dark beer. It's a stout, which I'll get to as well. So they cover everything, but it just felt like there's a little bit of a different twist to what they do. The beer I've got is called Total Bicep, and this was recommended by Dave, another Dave, who we will hear from shortly. And it is a cherry chocolate stout. I don't think if I gave you 10 guesses, you would be able to guess which hop is in this. I've just seen what it is, and I'm quite surprised.
Centennial.
No, much more distinct flavour than something like a Centennial.
Go on, what is it?
Sabro.
Oh, really? Wow. You wouldn't associate that sort of beer with Sabro, would you?
Not at all. It's poured out like engine oil, no head whatsoever, 6.7%. Okay, there is some cherry on the nose. That sort of Morello soury cherry that you'd think of a Black Forest, more than like a glacé, for example. Oh, that's good. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah?
Dave, that's really good. Way fuller than I expected off the pour. Really full of cherry. Doesn't taste synthetic cherry at all. I'll have to just have a quick look on the back of the can to see what the cherry was. So the ingredients, barley, wheat, oats. There is lactose in there. Yeast, hops, chocolate, cherry, water. So don't think we're dealing with what we've had before with chocolate orange, where it's orange extract or that basically sort of orange, but not quite. That's really nice. That'd be really nice on cask or keg, I think. No, it's really good. And as I say, it's another Dave. We have 3 Daves for this section today. So I will hand over to Dave to tell us a bit more about not only this beer, but 10 Ton Brewing as a whole.
We're a 5-hectare brew pub attached to the side of the 10-ton tap house, which was a craft bar started in 2020 by my business partner, Jason. We decided to slap a brewery on the side after a conversation deep into the night out the front of the pub. He was finishing a shift and I was there drinking, and we got to know each other and realised that we had a lot of the same thoughts about beer. So the idea of starting a brewery sort of came up. I've been working in beer my whole career since 2003. When I was 16, started in real ale. We tend to brew a whole range of stuff, a hazy pale, a NEPA, a black IPA, a red ale. We've now just started doing some cask beer. So I've got a dark mild and best bitter, but we're just constantly brewing new things. Having a small kit like this, you can just continue to improvise and develop new recipes and just have fun, really. We have really enjoyed that over the last couple of years. I think we've done 83 different brews since we started, and we're now going back to rebrewing some things and getting some more regular things on. But I'm not at all afraid of running out of a particular brand and having something new rather than having a core range, as I've been used to doing in all of my work in breweries in the past. The beers that I've sent you, the one that I'd really like you to try is the Total Bicep Cherry Chocolate Stout, brewed in collaboration with the Doom band Conan. They're a big inspiration to us. Our beer names and beer styles tend to be influenced by comedy and music. So we have a lot of sort of 90s comedy references in our beer names, and quite often we'll also reference some sort of heavier music as well. So that's a 6.7 cherry chocolate stout, but really drinkable. It's not overly thick. It's a really quite thirst quenching stout. I'm really happy with it. So yeah, cheers guys. Enjoy.
Thanks very much, Dave. It's always nice when they're called Dave because it makes it very easy for us. Yeah, it's nice to find out more about that brewery because, again, it was one I'd never heard of at all. Nothing about them whatsoever.
No, and this beer at the moment isn't available to buy, but Dave kindly sent down a few others. There's a strawberry sour, but I will keep that back for you.
Ah, nice.
And then there is a double IPA, which I'm pretty sure I've got in the fridge, and a citrus wit beer, which I know I've got in the fridge. There's some different bits and bobs on the site, very reasonably priced. The cans are about £5, between 5 and 6. And they've got the thing that we love to see this time of year. They've got a cheese and beer evening, which you can attend on December the 2nd. And hopefully we will be doing our own cheese and beer tasting later on in the year, but just in time for Christmas, all being well.
Excellent. Well, I've got a beer that I reckon would go well with cheese, actually. This is chestnut beer.
Ooh, I like chestnut beer.
It's not something you come across very often, is it, at all?
No, it's very seasonal, which is nice to see.
By pure fluke, because this has been sat in the fridge for ages. I did wonder if it might be past its date, to be honest, but I've checked and it's June 26, so plenty of time left on it. And this brewery is called Bespoke Brewery, and they are from the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire. Now, Bespoke Brewery, because they do a lot of bespoke stuff for people, they will put their beer in a can for businesses, presents for people, sort of white label stuff. You could have your bespoke artwork and have this beer in your can. 4.2%. It says it's a surprising ale with the body of a porter, but the colour of a chestnut. I tell you what, I wasn't sure that I was going to like that. That is excellent.
Can you taste the sort of chestnut? And when I say that, it is that kind of nutty quality to it on the back end normally.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I can't stand chestnuts. Roasted chestnuts. People bang on about roasted chestnuts at Christmas, and I hate the things. But this is really lovely.
People also like them wet, don't they? Wet
Do they?
chestnuts. I've never quite understood that. Which when they say wet, that's like fallen down and put in a bag type thing. I think that's what's classed as wet. Someone can correct me on that. You do not see many of those now, even amongst trad beers, because that would be a trad style, a sort of chestnut brown.
I'm surprised it's in a can, actually, because you wouldn't usually find a beer like that in a can, but it works. It's really nice, that is. Now, you can't actually buy, they've stopped shipping nationally, Bespoke have, so you can't actually get hold of their beer. They do have a tap room, though. They're in Cinderford in Gloucestershire. So if you're ever over that way, have a look, because I would like to try more of their beers. They didn't send me this or anything. I think we found it in a garden centre somewhere. We've had that before where we've come across beers in garden centres, and I think that's where this came from. So we've just got the one can.
Yeah, garden centre is a bit of a decent source of brew to me. Probably just as a wider point. I feel like we've done this before, but behind the scenes, brew to me is a section which we probably have to put the most legwork into finding people. A sort of repeating plea. But if you're listening to this and either you're a brewer or you know someone and you think these guys should be on the podcast, or you've never talked about them, please do tell us. Just drop us a line on Instagram. We're Daftaboutcraft on Instagram. We're Daftaboutcraft on Facebook. You can email us, daftaboutcraft1@gmail.com. All input is greatly appreciated. All we want to do, as we've said plenty of times, is shine a light on breweries.
Yeah, shining a light is what we're all about. But yeah, that is excellent. Really impressed with that bespoke brewery. And it sounds like you are with yours as well, Dave.
This is Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. Daftaboutcraft, you're tuned to your favorite beer podcast.
It's interview time now on the podcast, and we welcome a brewery that you may well not have heard of. Hasn't been going long. End of last year they began, and the brewery we're talking about is Tun Brewing from Manchester. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Tun. Richard Alston. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure. We love a brewery that we think not many people are going to know about. And no insult to you, but I don't think people will know about Tun because you've not been going long and you haven't put too many beers out yet.
Yeah, so we've got Gem State of Mind, which is our New England IPA, Archetype, which is what we've called our Modern English IPA, and then we've got Lemon Drop, which is a dry hopped Pilsner.
Which we will get onto in a minute, because we do say about a peek behind the curtain for listeners from time to time. We've had technical issues, and those issues have meant that Dave and I couldn't wait any longer, and we started drinking the Pilsner, so we can talk about that very soon. But as Dave touched upon there, you started trading towards the end of last year. How did it all come about?
It's a very good question. I have been homebrewing since I was about 18, and I've always enjoyed the kind of creative aspect of making beer and then having that reward at the end of it, that you've made a product that you can drink. Obviously, at the beginning, it was probably barely palatable, but it's got better over the years. And life moved on as it does. And I went to university, trained as a doctor, and then obviously I've been spending most of my years since then going up kind of through the training pathways as a psychiatrist. The kind of homebrew hobby took a bit of a back seat. And more recently, things have kind of settled down, and I found it a really good creative outlet, very mindful, and just really enjoyed taking my mind off things. You know, work was stressful, life was stressful, and got back into the hobby and really enjoyed it. And I've always kind of had in the back of my mind that if I was to be in the fortunate position that, you know, I financially could start a business, that I would start a brewery. It's always been kind of a bit of a pipe dream of mine. And then just more recently, I just thought, well, why not? Why don't I just go for it? So that kind of led me down the kind of route of starting to develop some recipes, testing them out with my friends, letting them try the beer. Got some mixed feedback, good feedback, not so good feedback. And that's helped kind of refine the recipes. And then I thought, why not just go for it? Life's kind of in a good position for me to just go for it now. And so last year I bit the bullet and started Tun.
And how's it been for you? Is it a decision that you wake up every morning and think, oh, I'm so glad I did this? Or is it one you think, oh, why did I do this?
Well, had its own challenges. It's been busy. It's not an industry that I've worked in before, so it's kind of learning that as well. But I'm still working as a doctor part-time, and I look forward to the days when I'm now working for Tun, not so much the days when I'm working as a doctor. So I think that speaks for itself, really. I really enjoy it. I'm really passionate about it. And like I said, kind of at the beginning, creating a product that you can then kind of be proud of, that you can share with other people, that you get feedback from, which the majority of which has been really positive, I find hugely rewarding. So it's been challenging, but it's brilliant as well at the same time.
We've sort of interviewed over the years, and we often find we sort of jokingly refer to brewers when we get them on as sort of mad scientists. That seems to be the perfect sort of mindset to have. Doctor would be a new career we've not had before going into it, but I can see roughly, I think, some good parallels. Have you been able to draw on the previous or the current career to match with this one? Has it helped?
I think so. There's lots of things that I can draw from. You know, you have to be organised, you have to be a good multitasker. There is a kind of art and a creative aspect to being a doctor in addition to being a scientist. And I think that transfers quite nicely into running a brewery, because obviously there's science behind making beer, but making good beer doesn't sell just by itself. You've got to have a kind of artistic aspect to it, be doing something that's a bit more creative, a bit more interesting. And I think part of it as well is the passion of the brewer or the company that's making the beer as well. And that kind of story and the ethos of the company probably is the kind of most important thing in terms of selling the beer.
Tell us about that ethos then.
Well, I mean, it ties quite nicely into the question you just asked me. And I think I wanted to, again, carry some of my psychiatry background into the business, kind of take it as an opportunity to think about drinking culture in this country, because you might be thinking, well, why on earth is a doctor creating a product that, you know, essentially does cause people harm? And it's something I've thought about a lot going into this business, and I don't think it's an absolute barrier to making beer and selling alcohol, and that drives our ethos, is to actually be thinking about how can we do this responsibly. And the kind of main ethos behind Ton is about what we call drinking with purpose. So the beer is important, but it's more the experience around the drinking, who you're with, what you're doing, are you eating, are you watching entertainment, and that, thinking about it from a mindfulness kind of point of view about having a good relationship with beer, connecting to the manufacturing process, like I say, eating whilst you're drinking, not kind of going to hopefully in the near future tap rooms, not with the purpose of getting drunk, but to enjoy yourself with friends. And I think we obviously want to tie that in with having food outlets and entertainment, educational aspects, potentially a brewery tour, to really kind of connect people back to the manufacturing process. And I guess the craft that goes behind making the beer.
I completely get that. I think if any brewery is going to get that across quite quickly, it might be you, because Dave and I were talking before we start recording, and there's two things I really want to talk to you about. One we'll do in a bit, but the first thing was, you've not been around very long, but I don't think I've ever been as heavily marketed on social media by a new brewery as I was by you guys when it first came out. You were all of a sudden all over all the platforms. Like, my Facebook feed kept getting, not clogged, that's not the fair word, but kept popping up with tons of stuff. And I did think, crikey, this is I sort of had to check and thought, is this like, I don't know, a more traditional arm has taken on some sort of craft element and they've got the budget to chuck behind it, so they're going to target market me or something. But then you find out, no, not at all. So I feel like that must have been a conscious decision.
I had to learn quite quickly how to do marketing. I actually, because I've not come from a business background, I went on a course with the London School of Economics, what they term as a mini MBA, but essentially just kind of covering the core aspects of how to run a business, how to market it. The council as well, Manchester City Council, and the kind of local authorities within Greater Manchester also run some training for new businesses, and that was really helpful. And that was all free and funded through a government grant. So it was a very steep learning curve. And actually what I would say is, these days with the advent of AI and the kind of advertising models that Google and Facebook have, it is quite easy to be really hyper targeting people who are engaging with your website or interested in your product. So I think that helped as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just couldn't get away from you. But what is interesting is that the impression that those adverts gave us was that you were much bigger. We thought, who are these guys? It really worked. It gave across a really good impression.
Thank you.
No.
I was getting feedback from kind of friends, and I kind of just assumed it was because they were linked to being friends of friends. But it does sound like it, when it obviously was going to the right people.
And did that targeted marketing actually result in sales? Did it work for you? Did it get you noticed in the industry?
Yeah, I'd say so. Certainly within the local area, we had bars, pubs approaching us, which I wasn't really expecting that early on. I was expecting it to have to be quite a hard sell, going out and visiting everyone. So it certainly helped from that point of view. Yes, we've had quite a few sales on our website, which I would say actually has been probably the main source of revenue over the last 7 or 8 months. But I mean, I think the return on ad spend is less than 1. But I was kind of, again, expecting that, because being so early stage, I think, you've got to spend more than you get back just to get that kind of brand awareness. So hopefully we'll start to turn that around and we'll start to get a decent return on our advertising.
So where do you go from here? What's the next stage in Ton's development? Because it's worth saying that at the moment you're contract brewing.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting one, because me and Dave were talking about this before. When you talk about contract brewing, people like us will often think, oh, it's not a real brewery. And that's absolutely no insult whatsoever. It's not really the case with you, because you are actually brewing everything on your own tiny kit at home and then upscaling it at the brewery that you use. Have you faced any negativity by people knowing that you're contract brewing, or is that just nerds like us getting all excited?
Not as much as I was expecting. I was expecting it to be kind of poo-pooed and not people kind of not really recognizing us as a brewery. And yes, there's been a few kind of negative comments, but on the whole, it's been positive. And I think part of that is we are very transparent about it. I think if we try to hide it and try and kind of pass off that we are a brewery, I think that probably would have attracted a lot of negativity. But from the offset, I wanted to be really transparent and open about it. And so it's obviously very clear on our website that we contract brew. And like you said, I still have ownership over the recipes. I develop them at home. They go through multiple kind of phases of development, and then working with Farmyard, who are absolutely brilliant, and their head brewer Natalie, we work together to scale it up. Obviously, there has to be some tweaks in order to make it commercially viable and to fit their kit, but I think I'm getting a better understanding of how to develop the recipe in order for that to be possible. What I would also say is they are very hands off. When I was talking to some breweries, they were at the beginning when I was looking at who to work with, I think I kind of got the impression that some of them would have been a bit more hands off. You can't do that, can't do this. Whereas Farmyard will literally just take my recipe and they'll scale it up and just crack on with it, which has been really, really good.
It's probably also worth, if we're looking at contract brewing in a different light, which, Dave and I don't, as you said, we would look at it and first instinct would be, it's not really brewing, or it's all good because obviously it gets you the chance to do it. And for Farmyard, it's another revenue stream. If they've got the space to be able to do this while doing what they want to do, it's kind of a win-win, isn't it? They're allowing another brewery into the market, which is kind of what craft beer is all about, like that collaborative element. So perhaps we need to be a bit less judgmental in a way.
Opening a brewery, there's a huge barrier to entry. In order to buy just the equipment, you're looking at £50,000 to £100,000 depending on the size of the brew kit that you buy. And then there's all the additional costs of staff, premises, and all the kind of associated equipment that you have to buy. And actually, contract brewing was quite far down my kind of development timeline. I didn't really think about it at the beginning. I was initially starting off by literally just doing it in my back garden in this garden office that I have, but then came across actually that contract brewing is a viable option. And actually, I think because of the reputation it has, it's kind of quite hidden from the general public.
Yes.
And I think I think a lot of people would be surprised how much is actually brewed under contract.
I think if a lot of listeners had a little wander around Farmyard's brewery and they could see for themselves who they make beer for, they would be very surprised. Yeah. There's a lot of breweries out there that Farmyard are actually contract brewing for.
Yeah. And like you said, there is a place for it, and it is a really good way to get new breweries onto the scene. It's much lower risk for them, but still lets them test the market and get their product out there. And like I said, I think again, you'd be surprised how many well-known breweries actually started out that way. There's certainly several within Manchester that have. Would the longer term intention be to have your own brewery at your own premises? I've not ruled it out. It would be very nice to have. There are pros and cons for doing it. There is a lot of convenience in contract brewing out, particularly at the moment. Like I said, that there is a huge risk of purchasing our own equipment and getting our own premises, and that's reflected in the number of breweries that have closed over the last couple of years. But obviously, there probably will be a turning point where it's kind of pretty much impossible not to get our own brewery in terms of control over the production and timelines of brewery, because obviously we are tied to Farmyard brewing schedule, and we have to book quite far in advance to make our beers, whereas if you have your own brewery, you have much greater control over that.
We've talked a lot about what you've brewed or how you brew it, but as I say, Dave and I can't speak for Dave. Dave, have you finished one of your beers already?
Very nearly. Gem State of Mind's the New England. Well, you go first, Dave.
I had Lemon Drop. So it's fair to say that a dry hop Pilsner is slightly different. Lemon Drop as a hop, nice hop, underused hop, I think. And you do get a bit of a lemony nose to it. And it was an enjoyable, quite punchy for a Pilsner as well at 4.7%. I thought that was interesting as well. I enjoyed that. So, Dave will talk about New England in a minute, and then I've just opened the English IPA. But as three beers to launch with, they're quite varied. Like the New England would be kind of, I get that, like that makes sense. The other two would be a bit more out there. So I can't accuse you of just sort of going to do contract, like, I'm going to just release, I don't know, a 4%, a 5% and a 4.5% session pales and job done. You've pushed the envelope.
I'm really pleased that I didn't go with something safe. I'm glad that I didn't push the envelope a little bit. One thing, if I was to change, I probably would have looked at something a bit more sessionable within that kind of initial range. Particularly when we look at trade sales, it's much easier to sell lower alcohol beer to pubs and bars. It's much less risk for them. But I always wanted to launch with Archetype. That was a bit of a passion project of mine, which ties in with the Craft Beer channel on YouTube. They did their own revitalization of the English IPA, and I really enjoyed watching that documentary that they did, and that kind of inspired me to create my own kind of version of it. It's very close to what they did, but again, has my own kind of twist on it. And that was all about wanting to bring the newer generation English hops from Charles Fareham into the equation, which I think are brilliant. And I think it brings kind of brewing back to the UK rather than over-reliance on North American and New Zealand hops, which I thought was quite a good project to try and take on. And I wanted the range also to be relatively varied. I knew that there would have to be a lager, and I knew there would have to be something like a New England IPA or a fruity IPA, juicy IPA, which is why Gem State and Lemon Drop came in, and I wanted to do something a little bit more summery for Lemon Drop as well, which is why I did the dry hop with it. And I would say, I think a lot of people go into Lemon Drop expecting it to be shandy, which is it's not going to be, and I would just caution people against having that kind of expectation. It's more the like you said, the kind of aroma and the slight lemony hint to it, which I think complements the Pilsner quite nicely.
No, I couldn't agree more. I really liked that, and I've just started drinking Archetype, which is a very big departure from what I've just been drinking in a good sense. Now, definitely had Harlequin before, but I'm just looking at the other hops here. Admiral and Bodicea, not sure I would have had those. Jester I've had. Target would be unsure. So there's a different mix in there for sure. Like you say, you're bringing these British hops through. Definitely get what you've gone for with this idea of bringing together English and West Coast type of thing. Very big, very malty, very dry, quite oily. I find that with British hops. I don't think that's unfair. When I've had stuff with British hops, I find you get the hop oil seems to come through a bit more. Quite punchy flavours. As I said, sort of with the lemon thing, it's not a safe choice to come out with as your first sort of beer. I really respect that. What have you made of the New England, Dave?
It's one of those where you open the can and you can get a waft of it straight away. Those sort of stone fruit flavours and aromas just jump out of the can. And then when you pour it out, it just gets even more intense. We know what a New England IPA in our minds should taste like and what it should look like. And this pretty much is bang on all of those things. The pillowy thing, the stone fruits, the haziness, the thickness, the mouthfeel, all of that's there. Very nice indeed. 6.5% that is. So I'm going to open Archetype next. So the hops in there are Citra and Idaho 7, aren't they?
Which is where the name comes from. The kind of state nickname of Idaho is the Gem State. So that's where Gem State mine came from. And Idaho 7 is quite a remarkable hop. It is very, very punchy with the tropical stone fruity kind of flavour and aroma that you get off it. If I crack one of the cans open in our living room and my wife's sitting on the other side of the living room, she'll go, whoa, that smells amazing. That aroma just travels and it's so punchy. So if any homebrewers listen to your channel, I'd really recommend them give Idaho 7 a try because it's a brilliant hop.
We are finding actually that quite a few homebrewers do listen to this now, so hopefully somebody will take that on board. Okay, so looking at the cans as well, there's a lot of information on these cans, and I love that because so many breweries are guilty of not putting enough information on their cans, and we have to go scouring around the internet to find out what hops are in something, and I hate that. It's so annoying.
And not only that, I was just going to say, like, we got to just listed off the hops there, which was great. We love knowing that because, as Dave said, we're sort of nerds with this kind of thing. We love that. I would say your can wins one of the most accurate descriptions I've ever had because often, you know, it gets a bit overwrought sometimes, doesn't it, with what language is used as to what I should be tasted. And you've said with Archetype, marmalade on the palate. That is spot on. As soon as I read that and then put it to what I was drinking, I couldn't think of a better description if I tried. And that I really like that. It focuses your mind and you're thinking, yeah, that is marmalade-y. Like, it's brilliant. Rather than sort of lovely floral language about tasting like X, Y, and Z, and you're sort of trying to think of it. You know, I don't think it does, but no, as Dave said, the cans are a mine of information, which is very useful.
One of our things is we love a beer description to be accurate. So you've nailed that brief really well.
And I think that underpins the relationship I have with Farmyard because I created those labels before I received the product. So obviously that was based on my recipe and my tasting of my beer. And obviously, you know, they've nailed it in terms of replicating the beer. You know, there was a bit of a risk because I was worried, you know, that I'd put this on the can and then actually it wouldn't reflect the product. Because, you know, there's always going to be some variation between what you homebrew and what the contract brewer is going to produce. But no, they've replicated it extraordinarily well. So that's all credit to Farmyard.
So when they're brewing one of your recipes, are you there at Farmyard, getting involved? How does it work?
Not at the moment. They've invited me several times, but unfortunately, where the brewing schedule hasn't fitted with my psychiatry work schedule, and so that I haven't had the chance to go there. But like I said, that they're very welcome to me coming along and helping out and getting involved. And hopefully, as I reduce my doctor hours, then I'll be able to go over and get a bit more involved in the process. But I have been there, I've met the team, I've seen kind of how they work, tasted their beer, it's incredible. So yeah, no, I think I definitely want to get more involved, and obviously that's going to be useful should we get our own brewery, just to see kind of how a brew day works at a commercial brewery.
It's a great space they've got up there as well, isn't it? For anybody who hasn't been there, it is literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it was fun finding it. Steve is the owner. I think it's his dad's farm. And so he's got his own barn, essentially, which he's converted into a brewery. So it's a huge space. It's amazing. They're open at the weekends. So if anyone's local, do go pay them a visit, because they do really good beer.
Right, having finished Gem State of Mind, I'm going to open Archetype next.
And I'm going to crack open my can of Gem State.
I won't be cracking open my can of Gem State because I do have to get up for work in the morning. So.
Well, I've been reliably informed that actually Gem State should be even bolder.
Oh, wow.
But someone said that, we need to punch it up to 7%. But I think I'm quite happy with it as it is. We got a double IPA in the works.
Are you thinking of stouts, sours? What have you got in the locker?
So we are going through the kind of next phase of the business, and it's going to be about growth. So we are releasing 3 new beers. So we are redoing Archetype. We're going to put that through another batch. I am going to slightly revise the recipe at some point, not for this batch, but probably the one afterwards. And it kind of feeds back to what you were saying about the oiliness of the hops. So I think I might tone down the Admiral, because that's one of the kind of more classic English hops. And I think that's coming through a little bit too strong. I want to highlight the newer hops a bit more. And I think they are being overshadowed by the Admiral, which is where that oiliness is coming from. So that's going to be a revision on Archetype. Like I said, it's not going to be the next batch, but hopefully the one after. We've got a stout, and that's going to be brewed, a classic Irish stout, really simple, nothing too complicated or out there. I tried 2 variants of it, one just completely classic Irish stout, and the other one I dry hopped with, I can't remember which hop it was, I think it was one of the New Zealand hops, and kind of chocolate malt and all sorts, and actually I preferred the classic one. So I've gone with that for the Irish stout. I wanted it to be a nitrous stout, but Farmyard don't do nitrogenated beer, so it's just going to be a classic kind of carbon dioxide stout. We've also got a New Zealand Pale Ale, which is going to be our session, probably around 3.84%, and that's got Nelson Sauvin in it, and then a couple of the other ones which I can never pronounce. So
don't worry, we butcher those. So what? Rawaka, Motueka.
Yes, that's in there. So I'll be dry hopped with them, and then thereafter I've got a few more kind of recipes. Like I said, I've got a double IPA and a North German Pilsner, which I haven't decided on when to release that one, whether I'll wait till next spring or whether we'll go for it.
Are you going to be releasing in kind of batches of 3 new ones each time?
No, I mean, the plan is to be releasing a new beer initially every kind of 6 to 8 weeks. But there's been lots going on recently, lots of kind of new agencies that have come aboard to help with us, and we've got a new head of sales. So I've been busy setting that all up. So we've basically condensed the next 3 releases into one very quick succession of releases. But thereafter, we'll probably be looking at every 6 to 8 weeks.
That's a good time. It keeps people like us interested. Yeah. And you want to be having new beers out yourself. You don't just want the same beers in your range all the time, I don't think.
If you look over our historic sales, every time we've released a new beer, there's been a massive spike in sales. And I think that reflects the craft beer lover community who love something new and not something new to try. So obviously that needs to be part of our business plan, is to kind of obviously keep being innovative and keep coming out with new things and seeing what works, what doesn't work, develop our core range, which I'm hoping will be the 3 that we've already released plus 1 or 2 more. But like I say, we'll listen to the customers, see what works for them.
It also looks like you're not afraid of trying any style with what you're putting out there. There is a model where you can brew and you could just send out variants on pails with different hops and people will buy them. And we know that model works because plenty of breweries do it. But you look like you're very keen to explore as many styles as possible. Is there any styles that you don't want to approach? Like, are you sort of open to doing have to ask because Dave likes them still sours, or sort of the wild ale type of things, which are different? Or
I'm open to everything and anything. Sour, they're very much of the moment and they're very popular at the moment. So I think we definitely need to do our own version. I'm not a massive fan of them. Having said that, all the sours I've tasted to date, I've not liked, except for the one at Farmyard, which was amazing.
I was about to say they do some great sours at Farmyard.
Yeah. I think that the one I had was infused with sandfire, which is a bit like seaweed. It's kind of like a weed that grows on the coast, and it was delicious. And you could really taste that, really kind of salty, and it worked really well for the sour. I think it complemented the kind of salty sour flavour to it. So yeah, I think we'll definitely do our own one. I think it's currently in our kind of plan for next summer. I wouldn't say there's anything that we'd completely rule out. I think the only thing we can't brew at Farmyard is a certain kind of wild strain of yeast, because I think it just contaminates the tanks. So that's the only thing that we definitely can't do. And like I say, we can't nitrogenate the beer, so we can't do any nitro beers there.
You talked about the English IPA and that sort of pet project. Are you sort of quite keen to do things where there's a bit of a history to the beer, like older recipes, and if that'd be something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. I was toying with the idea of doing an ale which is essentially bittered with chamomile, because that's essentially what they used to use in the Middle Ages. So I'm kind of open to really exploring those kind of things, but it has to work at the end of the day. If you're going to do it commercially, if it tastes disgusting, then there's probably a reason why we moved away from using chamomile. But there's other things, beers all around the world that haven't really hit mainstream, which I'd be interested in exploring. For example, there's milk that in Africa they ferment milk, which apparently is delicious. So things like that I'm open to trying. But yeah, no, I wouldn't say there's anything that I absolutely wouldn't try. The other area that we're going to explore is of course cask. And I think Archetype would work really nicely as a cask ale. And with that comes the kind of more traditional English styles of beer like bitter, blonde ales, etc., which we can also explore. If you look at it from a business point of view, the only kind of negative about doing cask is the whole batch has to be cask. You can't split it between cans and kegs very easily. So we've got to be fairly confident that we can sell it. And obviously it has a short shelf life as well. So we'll need to be confident that we can get through it all, which I think we will be able to. We've had a lot of interest, people asking for cask. And I know it does sell well. So it's just about building that confidence and connections and making sure that we can sell it when we do.
I was going to ask you about the beer festival that you did, because you did Craft Brew Festival Manchester, beginning of June, was it? What was that like for you? Because that was your very first beer festival.
It was probably not the cleverest idea to do that as your first ever beer festival.
Look, you had a queue all day.
Which was partly probably due to the issues that we had with our equipment, but no, it was nice to see the interest. For those who don't know, it's one of the biggest Manchester kind of craft beer festivals, and it's one of the festivals where you essentially get unlimited drinks. So there's a lot of people there and a high turnover of beer. And we had some equipment issues where our essentially taps were just causing all sorts of mayhem, frothy beer, and Dave very kindly jumped in to help out, which was very much appreciated, whilst I was trying to sort out the kegs and the lines and all sorts.
I think you'd say it was a baptism of fire, but
yes.
But those things are really good for you, because you are faced with all these problems and you've got to deal with them there and then. You've got a queue and you've got to serve these thirsty punters.
Yeah, which again, I think as my background as a doctor, kind of trying to stay calm under that kind of level of pressure probably was useful in that situation, because it was very, very stressful, wanting to deliver, not wanting to let the organisers down by not being able to serve the beer. But I think we got there in the end and actually learnt a huge amount of how to set up the bar, which we then brought into the next festival that we did the following week, and that was perfect, no problems at all. So that was a nice contrast, and it was much more chilled out, and it was their first beer festival. It was Indie Baum in Rochdale.
So would you be looking to do more festivals and getting your name out there that way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a big learning curve. It was recognizing actually how good beer festivals are for exposure, connecting with customers, getting feedback. We actually got some trade connections through it, which we didn't know about at the time, but it was people trying our beer, and then they've since contacted us afterwards. So it's definitely good for networking as well, and getting the brand out there, and they're brilliant fun as well. It's great fun.
You've already dipped your toe into beer festivals, and that's going well. What else do you want to do with Ton? Like, if we were to give you a blank canvas and I don't know, an unlimited budget, if we talk to you again in a year's time, what's happened? What would Ton look like?
So I think it's feeding into the ethos more and proving that kind of concept. Ultimately, I want this to be within an event space. So I do like a large food-like hall. Even better would be have the brewery within it, a bit like Track, having a big space where you can see the brewery, connect to the brewery, but also have food stores and potentially a stage where you can do entertainment. I think that's probably a couple of years off, assuming we continue our growth. Having said that, there's a couple of big projects within Chorlton that could fit quite nicely, one of which is exactly kind of what I envisage. So we're going to approach the developers about that. I think in the meantime, the best way to test that is by hosting essentially our own festival within Chorlton, which I'm hoping to do next summer.
Would that be your beer festival, your beers, or would that be you And others?
The way I see it is we'd essentially be running the bar and then having everything kind of around, central space where people can sit down, eat, hopefully have some live music, maybe have a comedy show, maybe a talk about beer. Like I say, it's about drinking to enjoy the experience and the environment rather than turning up to a beer festival to get drunk, essentially.
I love that whole idea because I say this a lot on the podcast. For me, it's a byproduct I don't necessarily want to get. I just want to drink lots of nice beers. I don't want to be unable to walk at the end of the day. I just want lots of nice beers. And some people do go out with the sole intention of drinking too much and getting a bit worse for wear, but it's not what we're all about. And a lot of people into craft beer, that's not the ethos of what it's all for.
No, and I think obviously that's reflected in the product. Most craft beer is high quality, comes at a higher price point, but in some ways that encourages people to be discerning in the beer that they choose and also the quantity that they drink. And I think that's important. And that's what we've, again, kind of going back to our products, but we're not skimping on the ingredients. We're picking the high quality ingredients. We're not reducing the hops on it just because of cost. If it's going to be more expensive, it's going to be more expensive. But we want that product to be good. And going back to kind of an earlier question about other beers, I think an important area which we've not talked about, which ties into our ethos, and also ties in with current trends, is low or no alcohol beer, which we're very keen to explore. It's not something I've homebrewed. That's going to be a whole new learning experience, but something I definitely want to try. And again, I'm sure Farmyard will be very supportive of that and help me come up with a feasible way of doing it with their equipment as well.
Yeah, it's becoming so popular now, isn't it? You're almost an outcast if you haven't got a no-low beer to bring to the party.
And I think the kind of second learning point I'll discuss is dealing with dry January. It was really kind of tough. Obviously, we launched at the end of November, which was good in the lead up to Christmas, but then obviously with dry January, not having an alcohol-free beer, essentially we had near enough no sales throughout the whole of January. So I think having a low alcohol beer that we can launch at that period of time will help with those sales.
So let me ask you, if we roll forward another 12 months, 2 years, where do you want the business to be then?
I think, assuming we'll go on the same trajectory, it is about getting that space, proving that kind of side of my vision and kind of ethos behind the company. Either just a space or having a brewery as well, which again is something I haven't completely decided on. I think when I started the journey, I was very clear that I wanted to have my own brewery, but now less convinced. But it would be nice. It would be nice to have, but not an essential. But I think we can still get across that kind of vision without having the brewery if that's not going to be the viable option.
Looking on the website, if people do want to get hold of your beers off the website, a 6-pack of the beers that we've all talked about tonight, £20. So it feels like they're being priced very fairly. And is that sort of something you're just keen to keep going with? We talked about things like a double IPA, which that's going to be a different challenge. Are you sort of mindful of things like that now where when you want to have a cost point, making you money, but not putting the customer off?
Well, as I'm sure everyone who's listening to this is aware, the cost of ingredients has skyrocketed since COVID, partly due to inflation, partly due to the Ukraine war, Ukraine being one of the biggest world producers of barley. And the cost of energy. Brewing is an incredibly energy intensive process. Prices have gone up, tax has gone up, it went up again this year. So I think it's inevitable the prices are going to increase. Farmyard have passed on, obviously, price increases for this year. So next batch of Archetype probably will go up in price. It's inevitable that prices will go up over the next few years. Something like a double IPA, I think the demand is out there. Even if it does come at a higher price point, obviously it's going to be more expensive because it's taxed more. And obviously you put more hops into it and more grain. But I think we're not too worried about selling it because people do want it. And I think people want beers throughout the range. Some people want their stout to be an imperial stout over 10%. Some people are happy with a 4% stout. And I think that there is a demand for all beer ranges within and all alcohol percentages. I think what we do need to be careful about, and which is what I alluded to earlier, is about selling to trade. The higher the alcohol, the harder it is to sell. But that should become less of a problem if we get our own premises.
And if people do want to get hold of your beers, what is that website address?
So it's tonbrewing.com.
We should probably also just say before we wrap up, the name, Ton Brewing, what was the influence for that?
Tons are vessels that you make beer in. And the other kind of aspect of it was kind of pure chance. I think my brother was thinking of kind of inspiration for the name and was reading through the Chorlton Wikipedia page and came across the TON at the end of Chorlton and where that came from. And it's actually an Old English word, which essentially means settlement or community, group of people. And the Old English word is ton, T-U-N, which I thought was quite nice how it tied in the location, the ethos, and the brewing methods all into one kind of word. So I thought it was one of those eureka moments. It was like, well, it's obvious what we're going to call our brewery.
Daftaboutcraft.
every episode of Daftaboutcraft, we look back at what we've been drinking in the previous few weeks. Although we've not been very good at checking beers in recently, and we were sort of forgetting to check stuff in, aren't we?
I've noticed that sort of race to check it in and give it a rating is waning for me. I'm not as fussed. It's probably reflective of what I now do drinking wise. If I don't like or it doesn't really do anything, I might forget to check it in. If I like it, I'll take the time to check it in.
100%. That's exactly the same as me. Hence, I don't check everything in. But anyway, so the beers we have checked in recently, we've looked back at those and we're going to pick our favourites since the last episode. Dave, what are you kicking off with?
I am kicking off with one from Two Flints, who I must admit I was a little bit sceptical of as a brewery to begin with when they sort of launched to fairly good amount of fanfare, and I remember having a couple of beers and sort of thinking, not too worried. Since then, they featured very well on the stag do I went to in August, where I gave the stag a third of a dipper.
Well, you had a 17% Tartarus on your stag, do you remember?
No, but very nice the rub.
I found the video the other day of just putting you in the taxi after you'd had that 17% Tartarus beer. Anyway, I digress.
And that was on top of some stronger ones before that. As you say, we digress. And that was very well received, and with good reason. It was a good beer. It seems that they have a bit of a sweet spot with dippers because I've got a can of Dripping In, which is their sort of single hop style name. So it's Dripping In Citra, for example. This is what they do. So Dripping In Eggers Special. Now, Eggers Special is actually Rewaka, but it is a rare late pick hop, so says the blurb, from all the way from New Zealand. And to be fair, if you want sticky, sweet, a little bit dank, it did a lot of things. That was what I enjoyed about this beer. It went sort of all over the shop. 1 minute it was a bit savoury, the next it went a bit sweet. It was strong. It was still very sticky sweet at times. It was a proper dipper. It just stood out because it did quite a lot, and they've obviously used the hop well. So that's my pick. Dripping In Eggers Special by Two Flints.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Saturated In series from Dea.
Yeah, exactly. Or the Phantom Duvet series, and they're very good at their single hop beers.
Well, my tried and tested is a beer that you know. I know you've had this because, funny enough, when I checked it in, I noticed that you checked it in and you gave it the magical 5 out of 5. And you will know this beer immediately when I say it to you. This is Pinot Porter from Yorkshire Heart.
Yeah. I didn't realise you still had one of those.
Well, yeah.
What is that beer?
Oh, my goodness. So you checked in May 2024, so 18 months ago. I kept hold of a bottle and I had it just a couple of nights ago. What a great beer that is. Yeah. Goodness me. 7% porter in a 750ml swing top bottle, which is always amazing. Aged in red wine barrels from their vineyard. So Yorkshire Heart, they run a vineyard in Yorkshire, funny enough. We had a couple of their beers on one episode, didn't we? And we were really impressed. I think it may have been a Hype or Tripe, actually. And we were really impressed. And I sort of put this one to the back of the cupboard and I fished it out the other night. Oh, my goodness. This is amazing. They're hiding their light under a bushel because you do not see much Yorkshire Heart out and about.
No, and this is the problem because you've said that and you've just... I can't believe that we did that 18 months ago because I remember the beer now when you've said it like yesterday. And I'm sort of thinking, oh, my goodness, is there still more available? You know, they have a core range. There's a Citra IPA, there's a stout and things like that. But yeah, those specials, really, really good.
Very subtle with the red wine coming in there. But if you get a chance to get any Yorkshire Heart, then do it. And they're really reasonably priced as well.
Daftaboutcraft, brought to you with mosaic board print, makers of supreme beer mats.
It's that time of year, Dave. What's a Festbier? What does that mean to you?
Right, so I thought you might lead off with this, and luckily I've come prepared. A Festbier is a German beer to begin with, and it's a lager, and it is brewed especially for Oktoberfest, which, yes, we know, Oktoberfest in Germany happens in September, but in Britain we still very much take it literally and do a lot of Oktoberfest things in October. These beers are brewed specifically for Oktoberfest. All your big German breweries, your Paulaner, basically any German brewery worth their salt will put together a Fest beer, which is a lager, golden in colour, I would say, and the sweet spot ABV-wise will be 5.8%. That's normally where they come in at.
So we've both got some beers in front of us. We've both got a German one and a British one. And the idea is we can just see how they all match, how the British ones match up to their German counterparts. So I've got Hackeshaw, their Oktoberfest Marzen, and I've got Harvest Festbier by Braybrook, who are well known for their lagers, obviously.
I've got Whiplash for the British and Irish contingent doing their Festbier, and then I've got Weihenstephaner for Germany, also a Festbier. So mine should be, in theory, quite similar.
Yeah, I'm expecting my German one to be darker than the Braybrook Festbier as well, I think.
It should be.
We talked about doing a special bonus episode for these beers, but the only trouble is that there's not that much to say about a Festbier because they follow a pretty similar sort of style. So we thought we'd put it in this episode rather than release it on its own.
Yeah, I think it's worth highlighting it to people because, for one thing, I've seen some Oktoberfest, and there would be some in air commas around them, events, and they're sort of being bastardized a bit over here. They're not exactly what I would call an Oktoberfest event to begin with, and certainly not Oktoberfest beers. They might be German beers, sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's an Oktober.
I think every Tom, Dick and Harry now wants to put on an event and call it an Oktoberfest event, and which is fine, you know, it's a marketing thing for a lot of places, but yeah, they're not actually Oktoberfest beers. They're just German beers. But I guess your man in the street's not too fussed about that.
Perhaps not, but I think it is worth highlighting because when it does get to this time of year, as we've sort of suggested there, everyone over here in Britain feels like they're brewing a Festbier. And there was Festbiers available in the middle of a supermarket. And I got hold of those, and they were 10 Festbiers from German brewers of varying size. There was some in there from breweries I'd never heard of, and then there was a couple of bigger ones. And as you touched upon there, like I've had probably more Festbiers this year than I've ever had. And I would say now, having had a lot of them, it is very difficult to really pick them apart. If it was a blind tasting event, it would be very, very tricky.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about blind tasting a lot, don't we? But that is a style that you'd be very hard pressed, I think, to pick out one brewery's Festbier from another.
How's your one? Which one? You started in Germany?
Yeah, so it's 5.8%. Bready, sort of toasted, biscuity. There's nothing outstanding going on. It's very nice, actually. It's very easy to drink, but there's not a huge amount to say about it, quite honestly.
It has poured quite amber. I'll give it that. Look at that compared to mine.
So what was yours again?
So I started with Into the Abyss, and they have used Vienna malt, Munich malt, and Pearl and Sartz hops. So they've gone for it in terms of making it with, you know, ingredients that it should be made with.
Yeah.
As a beer itself, quite a soapy nose, which sometimes you get with these types of beers. It's actually not the most easy drinking Fest beer I've had. Whether that is purely as visual a thing as this is in a can, and the vast majority of certainly the German Fest beers all come over in bottles. It's a bit soapy, a bit bready, as you say. Bready is probably the most defining characteristic you'll get with a Fest beer.
Not really selling it to me there, mate. A soapy beer.
Just a soapy nose. But it's a little bit soapy to taste as well. I will say this one has left the door wide ajar for the German beer to be better. It's not the best Fest beer I've had, and having had so many which have sort of blended into a nice, nothing bad, nothing outstanding, this one actually does sort of let itself down slightly, but it's not quite as good.
I think the assumption would always be that the German ones are going to be better.
Yeah, this is the other thing that it's worth pointing out with these Fest beers, is because they're German, and even if they're coming over from Germany, they still probably come in cheaper than buying a craft one. You know, even though I would say that the British ones aren't pricing themselves as like ridiculous, they're still sort of in the, what, 3 to 4.50 maybe for a can or a bottle of a British or equivalent, whereas the German one's probably more in the 3.50 park. Or if you got the pack that was available in the supermarket, which I did, they worked out at £2.50 a bottle, which is very reasonable for the quality of beer that they were.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder why you would pay more for a British interpretation of a beer from Germany that you can get for less.
I've now poured out the Weihenstephaner. I mean, these guys have been sending beer over to Britain for years and years and years. I know you can get some of their other beers in supermarkets, for example. Quite easy to get hold of. Look, that has poured pretty much. Can you see that, Dave? That's poured pretty much an identical colour. Can't really tell them apart on that sense. Lot more bready. Lot more bready nose. Lot fuller and bready. It's a better beer. It's quite easily a better beer, actually, without dunking on Whiplash too much. That's a way better beer.
In fairness, I suppose
It should be, shouldn't it?
It should be. They've got a rich heritage of making beers like this, whereas Whiplash haven't.
Yeah, and I like a Whiplash beer. That's why I saw they'd done it, and I thought, oh, you know what? If someone's going to put sort of either a twist or not even a twist, but perhaps faithfully replicate the style, it will be someone like a Whiplash. This is better. This is just that bit fuller. There's almost a little hint of caramel on the back end of it.
Having said that my British version may be quite different to the German one, the one I've got from Braybrook is actually their take on a Marzen, so it should actually be, I didn't know that until just, so it should be very similar. And the colour straight off is very
similar. Wow, yeah, it's bang on, isn't it?
Yeah, that could be the same beer again, couldn't it, as the German one? Okay, my first reaction there would be that the German one tastes, as it should do, a bit more authentic. This tastes a bit more aromatic.
Okay.
Than perhaps I was expecting it to. But I'll go again with another mouthful.
It's interesting as well, because you picked Braybrook, who I don't think, until this point, weirdly, have featured on the podcast, which is a shame, because I really like Braybrook beers. I always think of them as doing one of the many sort of watch-along brewers' evenings that there were during COVID. I remember really vividly a Braybrook one, and I've always liked them as a brewery because they are a lager brewery and nothing else, based in Market Harborough.
They remind me a bit completely different way of the Colonel in that they do their thing and they don't deviate from doing their thing.
Yeah, and they're a bit like Pillars in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed a Braybrook beer, and I think they've sort of, like you say, they've found the niche. Perhaps don't see as much of the beer out and about as I'd like to, personally. You know, if I saw somewhere that had a Braybrook lager on tap, like the Hells or something, I know I'd have multiple pints of it.
Yeah, maybe I'm just tasting again. Maybe that aromatic flavour I'm mentioning is a little bit of sweetness. They do talk in the description about a herbal lift from the German hops. Maybe I'm getting a bit of herbalness there.
Okay.
But it does taste different to the German one. I'm using the German one as a benchmark, I suppose, because that's, for me, how it should taste.
I think that's very reasonable. This is the idea for me of, you know, when we've talked about reinventing or reimagining a style from craft to traditional. Is it better to go toe to toe and try and make the most faithful fest beer that you could ever do here, or should you try and put a little bit of a spin on it? Sounds slightly like Braybrook have done a little bit of a spin. Nothing too out there, but just different enough. Whereas I feel like Whiplash have tried to make a fest beer as you get it in Germany, and the German one is better.
I think that's probably fair. What they say here is that their Braybrook's Fest beer is true to style, rich, malty, smooth, layers of toasted bread, caramel, and a gentle herbal lift from German hops. And I think that's probably right, to be honest, yeah. One of the reasons that drew me in to having Braybrook was the fact that it was in a bottle, the same as the German one.
Yes.
Braybrook love a bottle, don't they?
They love a bottle. I actually really like how their beers look. Like, I love the packaging and everything. I think it's simple but very effective. It's sort of making me half want to place an order, but then...
Well, this is the great thing about this little segment, is it made us go and buy beers that we wouldn't, and breweries that we wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards. We like Braybrook, but how often do we buy their beers? And the other one I've got here is from Lost and Grounded, and how often would I buy their beers? Not very often. To sum up, I think if you want a fest beer, just get the German ones.
I don't think that's harsh, because I think these guys live for this day in, day out. So even when they're not brewing this beer, they are brewing, because essentially all these big breweries in Germany, it's the purity law, it's lager and the variations thereof, and they do this 365. You know, we champion craft breweries in Britain and beyond for all the different things they do, and it's not as unfair as to be jack of all, master of none, but that, you know, the part of the appeal of craft beer is turning your hand to these different styles. And perhaps someone has something from their local craft brewery doing a fest beer or a Pils or a wheat beer, and then they think, oh, I really enjoyed that, where could I get more of it? Go to the source, which is Germany.
They've been making these beers for hundreds of years, haven't they, you know?
Yes, there is centuries worth of brewing behind them, and you've probably come out on the better end of the deal, I think. I think Braybrook, it shows that they've, you know, when you're dedicated to doing this kind of brewing, much like the German equivalents are, then you can really hone it. Whereas perhaps if it's insert craft brewery doing a fest beer because they should be doing a fest beer at this time of the year. You know, perhaps your money is better off just going and paying a little bit less and getting a German beer.
Well, there's the jaunty music from the 1980s/90s BBC show Pints of View, which means it is time for Pints of View. And there's a question, and we touched on it at the start of the episode, that we want to ask. Can you be bothered to go out anymore, Dave, and buy beer in pub?
It's not an easy answer. It used to be a very straightforward answer. Yes, of course, I want to go support the local pub. And that still very much rings true. I want to support the local pub. I want to support the local tap room or the brew pub or the craft beer bar, etc. I want to happily try and support all of them. However, is it financially, and that for me, this is now the main thing, is it financially viable to do that as easily? Possibly not. You know, speaking personally, I've had a job change situation again this year, and it has left me with less in my pocket each month, sort of significantly less. And one of the things, therefore, which gets straight to the top of the list that needs trimming back is leisure activities like going out or buying craft beer. So I know I'm not alone in that. I don't know about you. The problem I have is, you know how much these beers are very easily when you look at them on the numerous bottle shops that they will be on. And this applies to lots of breweries, and it's not the brewery's fault. And you see how much it is, and you know you could buy them and you could get them at home, or you could have it on tap. And I find the markup now between can and tap is getting a bit naughty at times, personally.
I just get sick of being ripped off in pubs, you know. I went somewhere recently, and this was a central Birmingham pub, and they got a beer from Attic on, and I thought, oh, I'll have that. They just run out, so there wasn't any of that. So I had to have neck oil from Beavertown. That's fine, but it was £8 odd a pint. 16 quid for 2 pints. Come on, that's ridiculous, isn't it? What is the point? What is the point of going out and paying 16 quid for 2 pints of neck oil?
Unless you're at an event where that's the kind of offering which is on tap, and you sort of think, well, if you really want to have a drink, you know you've got to pay the premium for it. But to be going to a pub and paying that, that doesn't sit well. The other problem I have is, I'm not even going to name breweries because it's not necessarily the brewery putting the markup on. They will sell the keg to the venue, and the venue then decides what the markup they want to put on it. But there are examples recently I have seen where beers that are perfectly decent, but nothing outrageous, either be it ABV, so it's not even a strength thing coming into it, and they are £8 a pint. And you know full well you can get the can direct from the website or from the brewer's website, or even from a bottle shop online or whatnot for a £5 direct. And maybe if you go somewhere else, there's a 50p to a pound markup, so £6, but that's still £2 minimum cheaper. Yeah, and it adds up, doesn't it? Like, it doesn't take many pints for that to add up. And you sort of think, well, I could have stayed at home and had 5 cans if I want to have 5 cans. Or if I have 5 pints, I'm now X more in the hole for it.
I mean, we're fully aware that costs for pubs have gone up, staff cost more and more, electricity costs more and more, all the rest of it. But still, I don't want to feel as though I'm being ripped off when I go out to a pub.
I don't know if ripped off is the right phrase in a way. I think the problem is something's got to give here because, as you say, hospitality's been squeezed, like so many industries are being squeezed. And when it's small businesses as well, with national insurance contributions going up as well as many other things, like you say, electric, basically everything costs more, and people haven't necessarily got more money in their pocket to combat that. If anything, have got less. So I get it, but they've got to get the money somewhere. For me, the model would be keep the prices lower as you can and try and get people to buy more than one of it, rather than whacking it hard. Because, as you say, if I'm going somewhere and a pint's £8, I'll look at it and I will definitely weigh up whether I think that is an £8 pint or not in my mind, or whether I think, well, like I say, could I just wait and buy the can if I'm that desperate for it? And over there's something that's £5.50 and it won't be massively different. Shall I have that instead? So does it actually work having this stuff on at that price?
Although, having said that, that pub I was in when it was £8 for a pint of Necor, the pub was absolutely packed. It was a Saturday afternoon and it was rammed. So maybe we're just getting old and grumpy, Dave.
There is that potential. I can't with good conscience, aside from sort of special events and whatnot, think to myself, right, you know, we're using £8 as sort of the arbitrary figure and think like, oh, I'll go out. I wouldn't go on my own, most likely. I'll be with someone else. Like you say, you buy 2 rounds each, so you've had 4 pints. And between you, that's 32 quid each for 4 beers. It just doesn't sit right. It just doesn't sit right because it doesn't marry up with everything else that goes on. But, you know, and we talk to the brewers every episode and we know costs are high. We know there is this pricing, but where is there the give? Or is this just the price of doing business now? Like everything has to go up until at some point people cry enough and just go, no, I can't, I won't pay that.
Yeah, it's a really complex subject, actually, isn't it? Because there's a lot of factors involved. I just find myself thinking more and more, can I actually be bothered to go out, make the effort to go out, to drink something in a pub, and maybe they haven't even got what I want to drink, but by the time I've got there, I've got to have something. I can just stay at home and have what I want.
There is that. And obviously, if you're buying from places, you are still giving them your custom. So it's, in a sense, it's not like you're saying, right, well, I could just sit at home and have 8 tins of Fosters and then, you know, no one wins. I wonder if it means that perhaps the era of the brew tap being the industrial space where you'd go and there's beer in a food truck is perhaps now not necessarily going to cut it anymore. And we've seen it, haven't we? When we've been talking to people recently, it's been more about getting involved in the community and being sort of perhaps there isn't the community pub anymore, but there is the community brew tap bit, or they've taken over the pub and it's a community pub. Perhaps that's what it might get back to. You know, there's different things going on every night, so people come in not just to come in and have a drink.
Yeah, and maybe that's the way the pub is going to go in the years to come now, with people's disposable income is becoming less and less almost as the months go by. You want to feel as though if you go to the pub, it's more than just going out for a drink and handing over your cash. It's almost like an experience. It's got to be worthwhile going out.
Yeah, that's it. It's got to be worthwhile, hasn't it? Now, I had a Sunday meal out only last weekend where we went out with a couple of friends, and it was the Arbour House in Ipswich, which do a good rolling line of, I only have 3 on keg normally, which are a bit different. They had a couple on from all day in Norfolk this time, and they were impressive, and they've done an event with them. But they've also got, you know, some of your usual suspects on other taps, and then they've got some cask, but it's all married up with food, and that was a good experience. You know, I had 3 pints. I think the pints were probably about 7 quid each. Not much cheaper than what we've been saying is too much, but at the same time it was a good experience. Whereas I think you and I are saying that perhaps the thing of going somewhere to go to, I don't know, somewhere's tap room, and from somewhere's tap room to go to another pub, and from there to go to another pub, and from there to maybe go to a pub that does food and things like that. Like, this could just be us getting older, but also, is that kind of thing even that viable now? Because that is a lot of money spent straight away. You almost need the brewery tap or where you start to be really good that you don't leave.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, yeah. Yeah, find a brewery tap that you like and just give them your money, stay there. What I tend to do now, I'll check out what beers are on in a certain place before I leave the house. And
100%.
If there's nothing on I particularly like, maybe I don't go. Or if I see there's a beer that I particularly want to try, then I'll go out. Maybe we're just becoming old, grumpy hermits. I don't know, but we're becoming a bit more discerning. And the prospect of going out and spending, if there's 2 of you, 40 or 50 quid on beer that you're not really a massive fan of, is just a complete waste of money.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head. Discerning is the word now, I think. This is what you have to do, I think, as a brewery now, because the market is still saturated, because the breweries will still keep pumping out lots of beer all the time. So it is a saturated market. It's not got really any less in that sense. I know there's not necessarily been many new breweries opening this year, but that doesn't mean that there's still not an awful lot of beer out there to drink. And I think it now possibly lies a bit more with venues, especially maybe to a lesser degree brewers, because we've talked to enough to know that if you want to keep the lights on and you want to sell pints and you want to keep the business going, you probably do need to produce pails, because that's still what, the de facto choice will be. But I think it probably goes to the venue now that you need to do a bit more than just go, yeah, we've got the latest on. That doesn't necessarily excite me like it might have done previously. I need to see more, I think.
Yeah, I think venues have to go the extra sort of mile to get you through the door these days. It's not just enough to put a beer on and hope people will come.
Get in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at Daftaboutcraft1. Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.